Shall we start? Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Jaipur Surgical School, which is actually an extension of the Jaipur Surgical Tutorial, which we do every Saturday 9 to 10 in the morning. But several colleagues from Africa requested that if we could start a new session for them because it was difficult for them to join the Saturday morning session. It was very early morning for them. So that is why we started the Jaipur Surgical School, which is every Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. And today we have a very special lecture, which is though non-surgical, but very important for all students and surgical colleagues as to how to write a scientific paper. And I don't think there could be a better speaker than Dr. Vikram Kate, who's a professor of surgery at the prestigious Jawaharlal Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research at Puducherry in southern part of India. He has a large number of very well cited, highly cited publications to his credit, and he's also author of several books. And to moderate this session, I have requested Dr. Piyush Sani, who till very recently was the chief of GI surgery at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the AIIMS in New Delhi, and has also been the editor of National Medical Journal of India and the president of the International Association of Medical Journal Editors. So with that introduction of the speaker and moderator, I hand it over to Dr. Piyush Sani.
Thank you, sir, for those kind words. I think I won't stand between the audience and Vikram, and all yours, Vikram. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. At the outset, first let me thank Professor Kapoor for giving me an opportunity to present in this prestigious Jaipur Surgical School. And it was a privilege to be there for the last year's conference held at Mahatma Gandhi Hospital at Jaipur. And of course, a little bit we have done research over here for last few decades, and through this talk I would like to share some of our experience. And I'm very humbled and grateful to Professor Piyush Sani, and everybody knows, as Professor Kapoor has said, he has got not only, there's no question of a publication in journals, he has been on international boards and been the president. So it is not that I would like to teach something here. I would be learning from Professor Kapoor and Professor Piyush Sani through this short talk on how to write a research paper. So I just share my slides. Yeah, so little bit I'll share about how to write a scientific research paper. When it comes to publishing and writing, it has got two components. One is writing the paper, and second is publishing the paper. But I thought that both require equal attention, and so this is the first part. Maybe later on I can take a talk on how to actually publish it. So this is the first aspect, that is scientific research paper writing. And as we all know that when it comes to any of our works, whether it is as a consultant, whether it's as a professor, or whether it's as a surgical trainee, it has got three important components. It is clinical, which everybody does, because as a trainee, you're supposed to do works in the wards. Everybody is looking at you, and the output is seen by everybody. So it is not that clinical work anybody can escape. So everybody has to do, whether the person is a trainee, intermediate consultant, senior consultant, everybody does, and everybody has to do. When it comes to academics, the teaching is there, the trainees are there to learn, they learn the academics, they read the books. Similarly, for the consultants, the same thing happens. So these two particular components are usually taken care by when we are actually doing our work. So it is something automated in the system. So not much concentration is required on this if somebody is ignoring that part. But the third component, that is the research, it definitely gets ignored to a certain extent at certain levels. Maybe it is a trainee level, maybe at an intermediate consultant level, or sometimes even rarely at a senior consultant level. Because the reason is, as I said, the first two are literally mandatory, and the last one, sometimes it can be optional in certain hospitals, in certain centers, in certain parts of life. So I've interacted with people, and then many of them have told that they have got a lot of large series on patients on some particular aspects of surgery, which is not commonly done. But when it is not published, it has no value, because unless and until you document it as a publication, nobody will know about it. And even if you go in some conference talks and give talk about it, very few people will know. So it's very important that research, whatever you do, whatever data collection you have, whatever you're doing, it should come into print. It should come into print in whatever journal you find suitable. That is why that aphorism is there: publish or perish. Now, if you look at this particular publication, now apparently it looks like a ordinary publication because it is a letter to editor written by two people, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, and it is about some unidentified curved bacilli in the stomach of patients. It was published in a very prestigious journal, all of you know, that is Lancet. But I am highlighting the length of the publication and the type of publication. It is letter to editor, a small part, and you can see how this initiated into something big, became very big and extraordinary. And 2.5 decades later, these people won the Nobel Prize for discovering Helicobacter pylori infection. So, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that it is not necessary sometimes when people say that at our setup, it is very difficult to do big sort of research. It is not possible to publish very prestigious articles. So it's not like that. Here, this is an example. It started as a letter to editor and fetched them the most prestigious prize in the world, that is the Nobel Prize. Now, what are seminal works? These are the works, these are the publications which don't happen very often, but when they happen, they can lead to a major breakthrough, and they can lead to a major change in practice. So, what we call it as landmark papers. These are very high quality papers, and most of them usually are accepted in good impact journals. So that is little bit in brief. I wanted to just touch upon what is landmark papers. Now, if you look at this example, this is in early 90s. The role of H. pylori in uncomplicated peptic ulcer was well established. However, the role in perforated duodenal ulcer was clearly not known. So this study published in Annals of Surgery, one of the leading journals in surgery, they said that usually we do a concomitant acid reducing surgery to prevent ulcer relapse following perforation closure. However, not everybody gets a recurrence. So if everybody does not get a recurrence, it may not be very important to do this surgery in every patient, because whatever said and done, acid reducing surgery had its own complications. The commonest acid reducing surgery in Japan earlier, like nowadays done rarely, was TVGJ. So the gastrojejunostomy used to produce lots of complications. So if the ulcer relapse rate is 60-70%, still 30-40% of the patients will get this operation, additional operation, which was not necessary. So based on this background, these people thought, why not? The time H. pylori was very well known, but not in perforated duodenal. So they did a study and they eradicated H. pylori. You can see the ulcer rate at 1 year. It had reduced drastically. Following 1 year later than that, we published a study which had a little larger number of patients. And we also found a similar type of finding that if the ulcer was there, H. pylori was there. Ulcer was not there. In those circumstances, H. pylori was not, indicating that this has got a very close association. And now it is well established fact that in a patient with perforated duodenal ulcer, if there is H. pylori infection, you need to eradicate it. This is just to emphasize that this paper, particularly, this is the first paper, it changed practice as far as the management of perforated duodenal ulcer was concerned, and it prevented an operation, which an additional operation, which definitely had certain degree of morbidity. So our paper again was quoted in landmark papers in the UK book as well as in the top papers in Indian surgical literature. This was just an article which was 15 years later. Actually, we did a study on ERAS pathway in emergency. So this again paper was not only selected for presidential plenary because this was one of its kind which was not done in the world at that point. Before this, only one short paper was there on 30-40 patients. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that sometimes some of the works what we do it can be very novel, and in those circumstances, and it can also lead to change in practice because up till this point of time, people were reluctant to actually use the RAS pathways in an emergency setting. But it is also important that every paper cannot be a landmark paper. As I said, at least although we have done a lot of work on corrosive strictures, but the thing is, those things also will be far and few when we compare the number of publications that we published. But all the publications are important if they're published in good journals because it definitely contributes to literature. So that is what is very important. So it is not that when we do any study, we think that this should become a landmark paper. That is not possible, and that sort of thought process should not be there. So what are the scientific paper types? We have reviews, we have case reports, case control, cohort studies, cross-sectional case series, systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and RCT. So different types of options are available to publish in the journals. Different types of options are available to do the studies and write a paper on it. So when people ask that we don't have much experience in paper writing, what do you suggest how we should start? So this is what usually I feel that it can be suggested that it is not very difficult to write a case report if some unique report you have got. You just have to go to literature and find out it is still unique. And in those circumstances, it has got only three components. You just write a short introduction, the case summary, and a little bit about discussion, few references. And you can have a good report if you have good pictures about that rare condition. And then if you have more than 2 or 3 cases, you can have a short case series. So this is how the publications can be started. So you get acclimatized to writing. You get acclimatized to how something can be put into a paper. And then slowly you can progress to case control, cohort, cross-sectional, otherwise randomized control trials if it is possible and feasible in the setting. And of course, then you have this meta-analysis, systemic reviews and reviews. Usually they come by invitation from the editors of the journal. So most of the times we have to restrict to this original articles and other case reports and then build up a name, and then you can get invites for writing the further things such as reviews, systematic review and meta-analysis. Now, this is our personal experience of writing. Many of our residents they are fond of writing and they're interested, and initial phase itself they start. So what I usually tell them is, if you write a full paper completely on your own under the guidance of your mentor, it should be your own work and it should be completely written by you. In those circumstances, you get almost 60 to 70% of the experience that is necessary for paper writing. If you can write 2, then it will add to another 10-15%. And if 3 to 4 articles you write, you can independently write an article. What I usually suggest to them that if you write something like this, 4 or 5 on your own, and if you go into a setup where it's an independent setup, or you are in a setup where not much close guidance is there for research or paper writing, you can continue on your own without much of close supervision. So that is why it's extremely important that first few papers should be written very confidently. This I'm talking about original articles. This I'm talking about full papers, not case reports. It should have the full impact pattern based upon some projects or studies. So before we see actually how do we actually do the paper writing, little bit background should be there where you're going to send the paper. As I said, I'm not going to talk today about publishing, but still something about you should know where it goes, how it goes into journal. So you should frequent to this part about instruction to authors in different journals. So you get an idea how the journals actually want the paper, the formatting of the paper, what they need actually in the paper, what's the length of the paper. So here it's written. So what we follow is that we don't actually tailor a manuscript according to a journal, but we prepare a master manuscript. which will be following. It has got the general guidelines of most of the journals. And then whenever we are sending it to a particular journal, we alter the manuscript into that particular format. If you take Annals of Surgery, it requires only first three authors. Most of the other things, if you take Vancouver style, it requires six authors. So we'll prepare everything and keep ready and then tailor, because it's not necessary that when you send it to Annals of Surgery, it will get published. It may not get published. So again, you have to come back to zero. And then if you have made three authors, again, next journal, you'll have to add further three authors. So it becomes a complicated process. So best is to have a master manuscript and tailor. This is what is one of the suggestions we usually tell. Then what is the order? Like if you have got a project, you have got a thesis, or you have got a research study data with you. So usually we start with figures and tables, what we are going to actually put into the paper. Everything cannot be put into the paper as figures and tables. And then we go and write the method. Then we write the methodology. Methodology is already there when we write protocol. So we have to you have to expand on that methodology, make it more detailed, so that all the components are actually included. Then results. I think there is somebody's mic is on. Can that be controlled?
Yeah, I will mute it.
Yeah. And then we write the results, discussion, and once you have got a good grasp over the paper, you have written it fully. Introduction, which is one of the important components of the paper, we write it last. And then, of course, conclusion is the final thing. And then a gist of this paper, which we call it as an abstract. And then reorder it into the typical EMRAT pattern, which is necessary for submission to the journals. So these are the contents of a manuscript: title page, abstract keywords, then background, introduction. Aims and objectives is usually a part of the last part of the introduction. Then methods, results, discussion, what we call EMRAT, and then references and table. Usually the EMRAT part, that is the introduction, methods, results, and discussion, is a continuous flow. Other things we write on separate pages as separate things. And then tables and then figures. Either put the figures, or if there are photographs and all, then we have to put the legends for the photographs. This is an example of original article. This thing, the title page. It'll have the title, then it'll have running title. It's a bridge title. They'll give how many basically characters the running title should be with the spaces. So its characters means all the alphabets. You have to count it and make sure that usually it will be around 50 or 40, something like that, and it should come within that. Running title is a part which comes on the other pages, which is not the front page of the article within the journal, so that you know which article you are reading. And then, of course, the authors, sometimes they'll ask the email IDs, you'll have to put it here, or all those things are little variable across the journals, but this is a broad thing. All the authors address for correspondence. Author contribution, some of them want it on the title page. They might ask word count, they might ask figure count. So that is all dependent on the types of journals. But overall, it follows that pattern. After this, we write the abstract. All this is the first thing what a reader will read before going into a published article. But the author writes it last, what I told earlier. And this is basically this is very important to know that it's a standalone statement. Not always the abstract will be there with the manuscript. In your manuscript, the abstract is before the actual part, the EMRAT part of the text. But abstracts are usually they are there on the PubMed. They are standalone, and many places they'll be standalone. So it should be something which it encapsulates the essence of the article and gives everything that is essential from the study. That is what is very important, because this is the reason why. What is the importance of abstract? It is there in the electronic databases. That's only there many times, unless and until the article is freely available. Then this is many times scrutinized by potential readers before they actually go into the article. Then many times what happens is the actual article may not be available, or you might have to pay. So some of the people, which is not a correct method, but they might cite an article based on the findings in the abstract. Then also it is used by some of the journals to send it to potential referees. If they find the abstract is fine, then they might send them the full manuscript. And of course, even including IASG, we do all the categorization based on abstract and categorize into different presentations, oral, award, etc. And even in Digestive Disease Week, a large conference, everything is done on the basis of abstract. And of course, this is also sometimes published. The DW publishes it, the American Gastroenterology Association, in that Gastroenterology journal, such a prestigious journal. All the abstracts will come into that. So similarly, it comes in different things. In IASC, we put the abstracts in tropical gastroenterology that way. So now coming to the core part of the manuscript. It has got four principal components: the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So when we see it this way, it is also described as a wine glass or an hourglass model. Because when we say look at the introduction, basically it is somewhat wide, not as wide as discussion, because you will have the rational. We'll see it a little later on what is introduction, but little bit we'll refer to other studies. So it has got a more wider perspective. Then we write our core methods that belongs to the study, although we'll be referring to other studies for the methodology, but actually it belongs to the study. So it a little bit narrows down. Results will further narrow down because it only belongs to the study. And the last part again widens up what we call it as discussion. That is why this particular what you call the format, it looks like an hourglass. So that's why it's called a wine glass or hourglass model. So a well-written manuscript should answer all these questions very clearly. As far as the introduction is concerned, why did you start the study? What is the rationale? Why it is necessary to do something like this? Then what have you done or how you have done the study? That will come in methods. Then what you have found, what did you find? That is results, and what does it all mean? So these are all Bradford Hill's questions, and a good manuscript should be able to answer all these things very, very clearly. It should not be very complex, otherwise people will not understand what is written in the article. Should be very, very lucid type of writing, which is very necessary in an article. So one more point I always tell is that when we write in a scientific paper, the writing slightly is different when we do it. It's from a spoken English. So the definitely it's not that if you have a good command of English and the typical spoken English, that may not be always the way we write a scientific research articles. When you write and read more and more of the articles, you get a hang of it. So what do we include in the introduction? Principally the rationale, why you are doing the study, reasons for conducting the research in the light of current knowledge. Because if the study you have performed it very well, if the study you have written it very well, if the study everything is executed very well, and you find almost all the journals are rejecting it, the reason is that you have chosen something which does not have value in the present current knowledge. Either it is already well known or something very irrelevant, people are not interested in it. So that is why it's extremely important that when you choose the subject, this is an extremely important aspect of writing, that it has to be chosen, a particular area has to be chosen, which is very much relevant and important. And the typical structure here, the format, what is described it looks something like a funnel shape. So when we are doing research on a particular area, we first see the broad part of the area. What is the condition, phenomenon investigated? How important or relevant it is? The condition, phenomenon, some focus part of it, and then the specific pointed research question. I'll just describe this based on example of this. Now, this is basically the title is Adapted ERAS Pathway as a Standard Care in Patients with Perforated Duodenal Ulcer, randomized controlled trial. So it's on ERAS on emergency. So this part says in the introduction that ERAS protocols in elective conditions have been well described. We have meta-analysis, everything is there, but publications on emergency are rare. That is why we are doing this study based on an emergency ERAS setting, and then we are actually doing it on perforated duodenal ulcer. That becomes a point-specific question, research question, that whether adapted ERAS pathways will work in a patient who has got a perforation. So this is how the funnel looks. So this is ERAS, then a little bit about elective, then you go to emergency, and this. Then the last part of the introduction, I said, you have the you have the aims and objectives, the broad aim, particularly what we mentioned there, and objectives we'll put it more in detail in methods. So it follows the PICO process, that is patient, intervention,
Yeah, good
control, and
afternoon.
outcome. So this is what it is that I put it in different colors for these two different studies. So this is the patient population, perforation peritonitis. Here, the elective thing, elective stoma reversal.
Yeah.
Then the intervention is adapted standard protocol. Here it is RAS protocol, and then control is standard care, and this is the in red. It's the outcome. So overall, especially when we're doing a randomized control trial, both these studies are RCTs. That it is very necessary that that you have a very point proper, specifically mentioned aims and objectives, the outcomes. So we come to the next part, that is the methods. Scientific integrity of the study and the credibility of the study depends substantially on the study design and methodology. This is extremely important, very important, because I'll tell it a little further. Now, if you look at this photograph, okay, what is this photograph? Who is this person and why is he holding this paper? This is actually a most famous error in a newspaper of all time. And it is every publisher's nightmare. So what is it ultimately? So this is the paper which was published.
Thank you.
That time that was the world's greatest newspaper, David Truman. And if you look at the photograph, it is Harry Truman, incumbent president, holding this, because these people thought, the Chicago Daily Tribune people thought that Dewey is going to defeat Truman. And in the last round, actually, Truman defeated Dewey. And what happened was, see, he's holding the paper triumphantly, smiling at the error in this. And this is actually one of the photographs which is framed in every big paper in the world, because this sort of major mistake. Now, once the paper is released, it is something irreversible and it cannot be changed. So same way it comes here. If you, in an IMRAD, when the reviewer actually has critically analyzed the study, he says introduction, something needs to be changed, you can change it. Discussion, something needs to be changed, you can change it. Results, you can change it. Methods, minor modifications are there, you can justify, or you can make a minor change. But the major fallacy is there in methods. Something which you have used, a technique or something which is not properly standardized, which is not properly done. In those circumstances, if it is a study of 2 years, 3 years, PhD studies are 4-5 years, everything will go down the drain and you'll have to redo practically the study. That's why it's extremely important that methodology has to be such that it should be irrefutable. It should be very, very properly standardized. Nobody should cross question and find out a major fallacy in a methodology. Because again, it's not a question of publishing in a journal, then you'll have to redo the study. So causes of rejection, of course, novelty, as I said, if novelty is not there, high chance of rejection. But otherwise, the most important area which gets targeted is methodology. Of course, then results discussion also can be targeted, but it's mainly this which can lead to rejection of the paper. All other things are actually minor things and which can be taken care of. For that, very rarely a good journal will reject it. So this is what is there, one of the comments, and most of them were targeted at the methodology. So how do you write the method so that it becomes reasonably good, so that you have a good chance of acceptance in a good journal? So divide it into parts so nothing gets left out. Study design, settings, patients, study procedure, outcomes, statistical analysis. So this is the study design for this particular study. Everything you written there, single center, prospective. Actually, for a randomized control trial, perspective is not necessary. Parallel arm, okay, 2 arms only were there, double blind, randomized control trial, etc., etc., etc. So all those things are there. So anybody who reads it will have a good idea that how you have done the study. So these are for this particular study also, similar way we have written it. And this was a superiority trial. You can do a superiority trial or non-inferiority trial. For ERAS, non-inferiority also can be done when you are looking at the complications. But we did the superiority trial comparing the length of hospitalization, and it was found to be superior. Of course, nowadays, without registration of the studies, you cannot send it to a journal because it requires the number. So that's why this number is put. CTRA is the Clinical Trials Registry of India, maintained by ICMR, and that is the number. Without that, you cannot actually submit it to the journal. So these are different areas, these are different headings under which this thing has been done. And that is why nothing gets left out. And when it comes to the primary and secondary outcome measures, we usually include it into the we include it into the outcome measures in the methodology. In the broad aim is always put. Sometimes some of the people also put the primary and secondary outcome little bit into the end of the introduction, just before the start of the methods. But here you have to put all the details. And what is extremely important is this is what is necessary. That references should be plenty into the methodology. We even target up to sometimes 10 to 12 to 15 references, so that everything, like here you can see that you see quality of life, etc., there's a reference. And then a Likert scale, there's a reference. And then uh, so whatever you can see here, there's so many other things, Lawrence classification. So that what happens is that if you are using a methodology which is very, very standard, accepted, all these references will be from standard publications. It's very, you may not face difficulties later on when you submit the journal for peer review. So because if anything, any question is asked targeting with a methodology, you can reply based on these standardized procedures which have been described early in the past. So you can see there's multiple references are interspersed in the methodology, and you should put it wherever it is required and necessary. Little bit, this cannot be, you cannot go into depth of it because this is a full class itself. But something should be known about sample size calculation, because that has to be mentioned in the manuscript. So what is sample size calculation? Basically, sample size is calculated so as to know how many patients are required for that particular study. And I'll show a little later how it is mentioned in the particular study. And why do we do this sample size calculation? This is done so that we don't perform these errors. A false positive or false negative. You've done a very good study, but the number is less, and you got a difference in those circumstances when there was no difference. And actually, it will lead to problems. Similarly, you again, the numbers are less, and you have actually missed the difference, false negative, because A is better than B, but you have not found it. Here you are saying A is better than B, but actually it is not. So those sort of things I'm telling that can lead. So that is why it's always better to have a proper sample size calculation. Target sample size. So this is how we mention it. Whenever we calculate the sample size, you'll have a primary outcome, and you can have sometimes more than one. If you have two primary outcomes, then the larger sample size you have to take of the two. And then, of course, you should know very clearly the effect size. Like here, length of hospitalization, how many days it should be reduced so that you'll call it clinically significant. So this is also not your own. If you put something on your own and later on justification becomes difficult, then the methodology again becomes, it becomes the fallacy of the methodology. So it's always better that past publications, whatever they feel, they consider that a good length of hospitalization decrease is there, the number. Okay, those numbers you can quote, and then of course you have to do the calculation with the help of a software, and then little bit margin you should give for dropout rate. So these are all similar type of things that there. Most of the ERAS studies, what we have done a superlative trials, and length of hospitalization is the target, the effect what we have taken. So this is a hunger based. Again, it was based on the days of hospitalization in the hospital. So again, we took it as the number of days, the reduction in number of days as the effect size. Now, it is important, I said, to reach the target sample size. Now, this particular paper, we had a target of 100, but we could only reach up to 94. And we thought that it is not necessary more than that. Because when we actually did the sample size calculation, it was based on this infection rate, 24, 14 and all. But in our setup, the infection rate was high. So we justified it. But a better way is always, as I said, always better to reach the sample size, so that this sort of questions will not be there, because this was the question which came for that. Then results. This is the highlight of the manuscript, the unique part of the study, most unique. Even in methodology, we'll use some information from other articles. Introduction, of course, we use, and discussion is about our article, our findings and others' findings. So this is only something which is absolutely unique to the study, that is the results. So this can be mentioned as a text, but most of the important things we should mention as tables, like we are put the primary and secondary outcome. So, or sometimes, if necessary, figures. And these are the tips for writing the results, don't confuse with discussion. No interpretation should be given. It should be providing the facts alone. What you have found, that's all. Just put it like that. No references are there in results in original articles, except very rarely when you're writing systematic review or meta-analysis. Provide numbers and p-values in short. You don't have to duplicate all the data of the tables because it will be double. And space is at premium, words are at premium. 3000 is the average word length of a manuscript, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And then be specific and show implication. No bias attitude should be there, relevance, and should present negative findings, side effects, everything. So it should be a very open type of written results, whatever you got from the study. Be truthful and write everything. And then leave it to the reader to make an independent judgment of what has been found in the study. That is very important. This is the most difficult part to write, the discussion. This takes some time to understand how to write a discussion. It is not like one para of your study and then one para of another study and then one para. Many of the theses I have seen, they will write like that, alternating. That's not the correct way of writing the discussion. So this is what we thought. We have this discussion can be put into these components. First is the summary of the results, a brief summary, because prior to that you have got results. So that is also the results only. So you have to make a short one para summary, then a knowledge gap and how your results have filled the knowledge gap to whatever extent. Then comparison with other studies, explanation for unusual results, and of course strengths and limitations, which you have to put in the end. And then conclusion is a part of discussion, the end of the discussion. So here again through this study, basically the important part. The primary outcome was the length of hospitalization, which has been maintained, which has been mentioned here. It has also been told that post-operative complications did not rise, and little bit about the secondary functional recovery parameters. So this is the condensed results in 4-5 lines. Then this was the deficiency in the published literature. They had not actually included the preoperative and intraoperative components in emergency, which were included in this study. So how your study has bridged the gap, and then comparison with some other studies, and then limitations. Limitations is always important to think over what are there and put it, because it is always better that you put the limitation rather than the reviewer points the limitation. Then there will be a problem. Same way it has been done here, and the limitations have been told. We had some 5-6 points which was not possible. Even in subsequent studies, we have mentioned that. And then the last part, it's not a separate subheading, but it's sometimes some journals will have it, but otherwise mostly it's a part of discussion. So what is exactly conclusion? Conclusion is answer to the aims and objectives. That is what. You never go beyond that. In conclusion, you should not write something which has not been derived from your own study. You cannot write conclusion derived from somebody else's study. You might have described that thing in discussion, but you can't put that. So this is what it is. The safety, feasibility, efficacy, etc., etc. And this is the answer. So that is what is the exact answer to the objectives. Particularly aims are broad, the objectives are very specific. That is what is conclusion. So here also you get, this is a systematic review. There also, these are the objectives, evidence of efficacy, adverse effects, costs. So everything has been answered in the conclusion. So that is what is conclusion. So the last aspect of it, little bit about negative studies. What do you mean by negative study? We wanted to prove A is better than B, but we have not found it that A is better than B. Are we disappointed? And then we just dump the study off in the drawer and forget about it. So that is what is called as file drawer problem. And we don't actually think about it, publishing what we have not got, what we wanted, or something like that. We had that in mind. And ultimately what happens is that these sort of studies don't get published. So what will happen if these studies don't get published? If somebody does a meta-analysis on the publications on a particular topic, you should have something like this, a symmetrical plot, funnel plot. This is what it is called. If treatment works, treatment does not work. If you have something like this, everything is showing treatment works, but nothing there, there's a hole there, then it is not a proper, this is what is called as publication bias. So there is a possibility that if people would have published here, you might have more dots here rather than this. That will indicate the treatment does not work rather than work. But if people don't publish it, then it gives an apparent view that actually the treatment works. But when we do a funnel plot, we can find it out and we can determine the publication bias. So what I'm trying to say, more important than that is, negative studies also can get published in good journals. Now, this is a study where we have done we had given perioperative high oxygen concentration to see whether the infection rates reduce in elective colorectal surgery. We did not find anything yet. Did not find. Actually, it got selected for SST plenary presentation, got published in Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery. So it is not necessary that if you would have found a difference only, they would have published it. Negative study also, they can publish it. Another major use of negative study is that if a lot of people say that this doesn't happen, 3, 4, 5 studies, other people will not waste resources on doing again similar type of study and give this sort of therapy. Similarly, here association between H. pylori and periampullary and pancreatic cancer case control study. This is the finding. We did not find an association. That does not mean that if you have not found an association, don't publish it. Then publish it and just come out in a reasonably good job. So it's not a big question of publication. Nowadays, we have the citations and H index and I index and all that. So it's necessary that if it goes into good journals, then it will get cited. If it gets cited, then this indices also arise. So to conclude, writing and publishing a scientific research paper becomes enjoyable when you split it into simpler sections and approach each section systematically. So this is how I started my journey as a senior resident. At the end of it, you can say that time, of course, there was no computer and all. We used to have those index medicus and go there and find out the references and then publish the papers. And of course, now the trainees are at an advantage and they have everything at the fingertips. And I'm very proud to say that many of these studies are resident studies and they have done very good work and published in very reputed journals. So once you publish, what are the advantages? Of course, for your if people are faculty, for promotions, etc., all these things. But more important in scientific research and writing, you get invites for good journals because invites from good journals, and you can do the reviews. And that will be again a review is not only for doing something for the journal, it's also a big learning point for self. And then you get those things, and sometimes you can also, if you're lucky, you can get a invite also to write a review or meta-analysis for a systematically. And if you have got good experience, then you can put it into books, as Professor Kapoor was mentioning. We have written some books. Professor Piyush Sahni is there. He's written many books, and this is something on scientific writing. And this has come this year itself, grant writing for medical professionals. And if you are lucky, Digestive Disease Week conference, Professor Sahni also was there in this conference, and I was lucky that I was just standing next to my poster, and this person visited. Of course, as I said, it was truly a very divine experience for me that Barry Marshall, Nobel laureate, was standing in front of me, and I've done quite some work on H. pylori, and it was very great to meet him. So thank you all for your kind attention, and happy to take any questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Kate. Piyush, you would like to add for the sake of students and audience?
I think Vikram, as usual, has covered all the aspects of writing a research paper. He hasn't left anything to anybody's imagination. I think what is extremely important is to not step back. When you start, you will always find it difficult, and don't stop. Continue, and if you continue, then you will find success. Once you get success, it could become addicting. So don't get addicted to it either. So I know of people who 3 years into their career have 200 publications. The only things they've done is, collected case reports after case reports, or case series after case series. So don't do that. That doesn't make sense. It's not a game where you have to win by just the sheer volume of publications that you have. No, that's not what is required. What you need to do is you need to start off by doing simple things. So writing case reports is not a bad idea at all. I know there are a lot of journals which will not publish case reports, but case reports have been called the Rolls-Royce of medicine. And, the first case of HIV/AIDS was reported as a case. It was a single case report. So there is no reason why, if you find something which is unusual, which is not well known, then you should not write a case report. I think what is important is to remember that you don't want to write the first case report in Jaipur, because nobody's ever reported the case in Jaipur. Yes, there may be a reason to write the first case report from Jaipur if there have been some changes that have happened which have made this case unique in Jaipur. Then yes. But otherwise, if you can't justify, if that case is the same as it was in New Delhi or in Mumbai or in the US or in the UK or in Japan or in Korea, then how does it make a difference? It doesn't. It doesn't add to the literature. It doesn't tell people, it doesn't provide people any information. For a rare disease, it may be useful because you need to know how many people in the world have been afflicted. You might need to want to see what is the kind of incidence and prevalence of the disease, and that may be useful for policymakers. So nothing wrong in doing case reports, but the appropriate kind of case reports. Don't start off with randomized control trials. You'll probably get it wrong the first time around. But if you have a good mentor like Vikram, then please certainly go ahead and do the first paper as a randomized control trial. Nothing wrong in it. But you must have somebody who should be able to give you the appropriate guidance. If you're on your own, use the help of books that have been published from India. Vikram has a book. We have a book. There are other books which have been published from elsewhere in the world. And the general guidance and the general rules are no different in India as they are in any other part of the world. Somebody has put it in the chat box. Please highlight upon the role of meta-analysis and systematic reviews in surgery. So, meta-analysis, strictly speaking, and systematic reviews are great things to do. They're best kind of evidence. But there's no point doing a meta-analysis of two papers, one of 45 patients and another of 33 patients. That doesn't make sense. But if I have enough data to be able to put things together and get a better input on what should be done in a particular set of patients, then of course there's a role for systematic reviews and meta-analyses in surgery as well. When I was a resident in training, I was told that you can't conduct randomized controlled trials in surgery. And I think Professor Kapoor was a couple of years senior to me in that residency training, and he would also have heard this refrain on a number of occasions from professors in our department in surgery. You can't do a randomized controlled trial in surgery, but that's not true. There are multiple randomized controlled trials in surgery that have been done. You may not be able to do a triple blinded study. You may not be able to blind the patient. You may not be able to blind the assessor, but you may be able to blind some people. And therefore, a randomized trial is certainly doable. And if you've got a few randomized trials and you feel that there is enough of a sample in each of those, but not enough for you to get an answer from them, then doing a meta-analysis is not a bad idea at all. Remember, meta-analyses, when they were initially described by Yusuf and Pito, Salim Yusuf from India, Chennai in fact, they described meta-analysis to be done in a manner in which people who were experts in the field, who knew of people who were doing studies in that area and who may not have published data, to get to them and get unpublished data from them, and then put all this data together to be able to get the correct answer. So you tried to get as big a sample as was available. Nowadays, everybody does a meta-analysis with 2 studies, and then somebody else does another meta-analysis the next day with 3 studies because of the third one published. Now, that doesn't, to my mind, make a lot of sense. Systematic reviews are places, obviously, again, there is a role for systematic reviews in surgery, as it is in any field of medicine. So there's no reason why you should not do systematic reviews or meta-analysis in surgery. There are people who've got their hands up for questions that they wish to ask Vikram,
Yeah.
and I think we can
Dr.
go
Guy
ahead.
Lamine, you can put your camera on and audio on and please ask. Dr. Lamine is from Senegal.
Thank you, Professor Kapoor. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you to Dr. Vikram for the outstanding lecture. I think this
Thank you.
is very, very, very relevant for all of us. So if you allow me, I have a question about what we call predatory publishing with some open access journal. The fact is a lot of researchers from low-income countries, they used to publish in doubtful journals, usually because publication charges are not very expensive. But as some people describe in the literature, someone whose name is Jeffrey Bill, he usually publish a list every year. He said that he tried to recognize journals who are not reliable because they have maybe false indexing number or false editorial boards. So do you have any advice for us in order to recognize the good journals where to publish and to avoid this predatory publishing? Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for your question, Dr. Lamine. Basically, one of the things, parameters that what we use to find out whether a journal is it falls. It's sometimes very difficult to differentiate, but it falls in category of predatory. See the volume, how long the journal is getting published. If the journal is being published for, let's say, 15 years, 20 years, or sometimes 25, 30, very, very unlikely that that journal is a predatory journal. Then, of course, as you said, you have to go to the editorial board. Then one of the screening parameters is whether it's indexed. If it is indexed in, you can find it on the PubMed, Medline indexing, and or even PubMed Central. There is a possibility that that is not a. I'm saying a possibility. There are some predatory journals which are also seen on that, and then the charges and the duration of reviews, how long it takes, and the time of publication from the acceptance. If it is just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, is very, very likely. See, all reputed journals also have something called as fast track publication, but that is very much different from this sort of publication. We find all the articles are getting reviewed, accepted within a matter of few weeks. Few weeks, when I say few weeks, is just 2, 3, 4 weeks. If all those things are there, then it's likely to be a predatory journal. Of course, predatory journal, they will also charge, but again, you have the open access model for reputed journals. Dr. Piyush also would like to add something to this.
There's another question from Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar?
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Kapoor and Professor Kate. And me, I have some hard difficult after writing as a paper. I have hard difficult to choice as a better journal to publish, and I need some
There is a problem with your internet connectivity. Since we have just 5 minutes left, I would say that any of the colleagues who are in the audience, if you have a manuscript which you have written and you want some comments or suggestions, I have kind of started this service where you send me the manuscript. I will make some suggestions as far as the structure of the article is or the manuscript is concerned, and return it back to you before you submit it to a journal. So if anyone has any manuscript on which you would like to have some comments and suggestions, I'm putting my email in the chat box, you can please send it to me. Dr. Umar, maybe you can write your question in the chat box so that Dr. Kati can read it. Yeah. Piyush, you would like to add anything more before, because we'll finish at close at 4. Yeah. And I would strongly suggest that if possible, please ask your departmental or institutional library. Dr. Kate, can you project that book once again, your book on scientific communication?
Yeah.
It's a Springer book authored by Dr. Kate. You may find some very useful tips as to how to write an article. The first one, writing and publishing a scientific research paper. There's another book by Dr. Piyush Sani and Dr. Rakesh Agarwal also. These are 2 very good books published from India on how to write a paper.
If I may add,
Yes.
the question on predatory journals, I think one of the best ways to try and figure out whether a journal is a pseudo journal, the more common or the newest terminology used is pseudo journals instead of predatory journals. To check whether a journal is a pseudo journal is to go to a website called Think Check Submit, www.thinkchecksubmit.com, and to then try and answer the questions that they pose to you. And based on the answers that you provide, you decide whether the journal is possibly a pseudo journal or a genuine journal. I think it's very difficult sometimes to make out whether a journal is a pseudo journal or
Piyush, maybe you can put the website in the chat box so that everybody can know.
Okay, I'll do that. So that's something that you can do. The other thing you can do is go to the website of the World Association of Medical Editors, and you would find an algorithm there to go through and check whether a journal falls within the pseudo journal group or not. So that was something additional that I thought could be useful.
Yeah, Dr. Omar, your question, how to choose a better journal, how to choose the better journal for publishing after writing. Usually, one of the policies that you should follow is always try to choose a journal which is at a higher level than what you think. Usually, when you have mentors, they will have an idea where this sort of article can get published at what level. So, if you feel that I'm not saying that journals have 1, 2, 3, 4 levels, but they have an idea. You have something called an impact factor that also gives some guidance. So, with that, always choose a journal which is at little higher place. With higher place journal, if they don't find it suitable, it can get rejected. Then you can choose something which is little lower like that. So that is one of the criteria you can use. Number 2 is that when you're writing a journal, you have references there in your article, original article, that will give you an idea which sort of journals it has gone into, the related articles. So that is one of the other ways to choose relevant journals, because if it falls into the scope of the journal, that's likely to get published. Even if your manuscript is good, your research topic is good, but if it doesn't fall into the scope, then it will not be accepted. One example I will give that many of the articles what we published, I showed, were in Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery. It has got impact factor, moderate impact factor of about 3.5. It could have gone into higher journals, but one of the criteria that is put by SSAT and DDW is that if you are publishing into SSAT plenary presentation, they said that it is mandatory that it should go into that journal. So that is why many of our articles have gone to that. But if that was not mandatory clause, then we could have chosen some journals for these articles, which we thought were reasonably novel, into something which have got higher impact factor. In surgery, if you see Annals of Surgery is there, JAMA Surgery is there, even British Journal of Surgery is there, they are definitely higher place than Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery. So that is how some of the points you can think about choosing a journal. For case report, you should try to put it as far as possible. If it is a PubMed index journal, because as Professor Sani has said, getting case reports accepted is not very easy at all. Most of the journals don't accept it, and then it takes very long time. Unless and until something is very novel, then only it will go into good journals. That's what is the reply to your question.
So it's 4. I think we will close, and I would once again like to thank Dr. Kate and Dr. Piyush Sani, and as also my former fellow and now a colleague in Ahmedabad, Dr. Avinash Nag, whose team provides all the technical support for all these online sessions. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
I would also like to thank Professor Kapoor, Professor Sani, and of course my mentor, Professor Anand Krishnan, from whom I have learned all this art of scientific writing, and I'm still learning from him as we collaborate very closely for the last 4 decades. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Piyush.